In this lesson, we're going to continue to build out our HTML page structure in anticipation of setting up our styling and being able to present it as an actual web page. So now we should be able to actually see some content here within that display area. So let's jump over to the navigation element here, and we've got an unordered list. And unordered lists are used in order to present a really nicely formatted way of presenting your navigation items. So you don't necessarily need to use an unordered list, but in common practice, a lot of web developers will be using unordered lists because this presents the content in a nice readable fashion. So you don't have to do it this way. You can use different other elements because of course we're going to be providing styling and we're going to be making it look entirely different. We're going to be removing that default unordered list styling. So within this lesson, I am going to be using an unordered list, and usually when I do create menus and navigation menus, I do it within this type of format. So let's create some hyperlinks within here. So these hyperlinks are going to be used in order to link together the various sections. So the idea is that I'm creating an anchor tag and I'm linking over to the web section that I want it to present when that anchor gets clicked. So hyperlinks, so you might be familiar with hyperlinks. So this is essentially what the internet is all about, linking between different web pages and connecting everything together, in a sense building out a web. And when we use hyperlinks, so these are really the core pieces of any website, is this ability in order to link together various pieces of content. So with hyperlinks, you might be familiar with actually going to a web page, but you can also use them as anchor, as they're intended as an anchor tag. You can use them to link to various IDs within your web page. So if I do hashtag home, so essentially this is going to link to this section, and it's going to know that whenever I click it, that this is an anchor to that particular section. So let's continue to build this out, and maybe I just type in home there. And so this one is ready to go. Whenever we click home, we're going to scroll down to this section down here. And let me add in some content here in order to better present this. So let's jump into here, and I'm going to do H1. And then maybe I can do a paragraph. Or maybe this should be an H2 so that it gets presented a little bit better. So the other thing that I'm adding here are these heading tags. And what heading tags do is they provide an emphasis on a particular piece of content. So you can see here within our display area, so when I added in these headings, that I added in homepage here, and the H1 is bigger than the H2, and it goes all the way down to H6, but you're very rarely going to be able to, you very rarely see H6s. Actually, I've never seen anyone use an H6. Because the idea of the concept of using heading tags is to start out with your H1s, which would be your most important headings, and then the H2s would be kind of like a subheading. So if I had additional headings here, then I would use H2s, but if I had another heading within this H2, then I would use H3, and so on. So they're all wrapped within each other, going all the way down. So the idea here is that I'm using, for this section, I'm probably only going to use H1 and H2 for each section, and I should actually probably stick to H2s for these additional sections because this is a single page website, and when the search engines come to your website, then you want a particular H1, so you don't want to overwhelm them with a bunch of H1s. You want to maybe only use one H1 for each single page, and when the search engine bot comes to your website, it's only going to see it as one single page. So it's going to read out all of that content. So be really mindful when you're using the H and the heading tags, because this is also used by search engines to gauge what the relevance of your content is and actually how it's going to rank it. So one of those important SEO tools to be mindful of when you're building out websites. So now I'm going to jump over to Blind Text Generator, and I'm going to create a bunch of paragraphs. So maybe I want to have, let's say, 4 paragraphs. So I select all, copy, and there's a few options over here where I can display it with the paragraph tags. So that's actually the version that I want, because I want this to be formatted and ready for HTML. So now let's go back over to our web page. I'm going to refresh it to get rid of that double there. And as I said, brackets is really good with this, but sometimes it doesn't refresh properly, so you'll see this duplicating of content, and this is just brackets doing that, so this isn't actually on the web page. So when you refresh it, what we're presented with is the actual web page content. So now when I click it, we actually go to the home section, which of course we're already on, and which of course is the only one we're being presented with. So let's go ahead and add in our additional list items. So remember, again, these are going to turn into the web page navigation area. So as we work through this, we're going to turn these into the web page navigation. So I'm just scrolling down so I can actually see the sections and how I've called them. So I'm going to type those in first. So we had about products, we had our contact page, and we just had an extra page. And of course, this is for demonstration purposes. So normally within a website, you wouldn't have that extra. And of course, we don't have to call the text within the hyperlink here. This is for display area only. So this isn't actually used for anything. This is just used in order to present the hyperlink. So you could actually call this whatever you want to call it. So this doesn't have to be the same as what's in here. But generally when we are making websites, we do try to keep everything in line. So we want everything to kind of make sense, that this hyperlink links to the extra section, and this is the purpose of it. So use your wording wisely, the semantics of the wording that you're using. Try to get it to make sense as much as possible within your website, so that when you are looking at it at a later point, that it just makes sense. So you know that this was that about section, and you don't actually have to comment within your web page. And in case you do have to comment, HTML comments can be created with the less than sign, the exclamation mark, 2 dashes, and this is and it is always good practice to do this type of commenting, because whenever you're sharing your code, or if you come back to your website and maybe it's been a few months since you've actually been using it, you can really easily jump back into it and get a better idea of what you were doing, what you were working on, and what the purpose for some of these sections would be. So when I come to that extra section, then maybe I want to note that this was just for this is just for just for demonstration purposes. This is the contact section, and of course within your commenting, you can comment as you need to. So it's not necessary, but it is a good idea, and you can place whatever information you want within this comment area. And notice as well that the comments don't actually show up. They're not presented to the user. So the comments are for just the coding section. They're not going to get presented to the user. So again, this is just for the web development purposes. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue to build out our structure and actually make it look like we've got something here, and then we're going to apply the styling later on within the course. And the styling is where things get really interesting, because we get to place our own spin on it, pick some colors, pick some styling, and really make it look the way that we want it to look. So that's all coming up in the next set of lessons, and then of course, as we progress through this course, we're going to complete this website and deliver a single page website that's going to be responsive.